So Genshin Impact has now been around for almost 6 years, so I thought I would talk a bit about Fontaine's law. To be more specific, its government structure. Hello everyone, my name is Mighty, and today I'll be talking about how I think the nation of Fontaine's government functions and operates. Now of course, I'll be relying on the Genshin Fandom Wiki page, as well as providing some theories of my own as to how I think their government runs, so please do take my theories with a grain of salt, since it does come from my own perspective as well as my experience of playing Genshin Impact for a long time. Also, I will say that there will be spoilers for the Fontaine Archon quest within this video, so please be advised before continuing. So without further ado, let's begin. So Fontaine's government is located in the center of the nation of Fontaine, at the top of the court of Fontaine, within a building called the Palais Mammonia. This is where all of the branches are located. They have a total of 4 branches, each with their own unique functions. Now I do apologize for my mispronunciation of the names. We have the Maison Gardiennage, the Maison Gestion, the Maison Cardinalice, and the Maison Ordalie. So let's begin with the Maison Cardinalice. But before that, let's talk about the people who are the heads of this government. That being, in Fontaine's case, Lady Farina and Iudex Neuvillette. Now I will provide a more simpler version, so I may not provide every detail for their duties. If you think that I have missed something, please provide a comment below. Lady Farina is of course represented as the Hydra Archon of Fontaine, but technically speaking, she is only the body and soul of the Archon, since her divine powers are within the oratories, as part of the Fontaine's plot. But for the sake of this topic, we will just be saying that she is the Hydra Archon, even if by name. As an Archon, Lady Farina does have her responsibilities of ruling over Fontaine as its absolute ruler. Though since Fontaine's government does have more branches compared to the other nations, it does seem to show that Lady Farina has distributed her power to either other people or branches, as in the case of Iudex Neuvillette, being the supreme judge of Fontaine's court. Though even if that's the case, Nahida did mention during the final act of Sumeru's Archon quest that Lady Farina does have the final say in a verdict. Though as we play through the Fontaine Archon quest, it seems that the Oratrice gives the final say, since by Fontaine's law, it is the final verdict of the courts. As for her other duties, the game doesn't really give us much when it comes down to her day-to-day duties, though since she is an Archon, one would believe that she does create Fontaine's laws without too much restrictions, as well as reviewing over some of the court trials, though during her flashback moments in Act 5, she does tend to give that role to Neuvillette, though it is not clear if she does this all the time. Another task that Lady Farina does is taking appointments made by her citizens, as shown in her flashbacks. This does suggest that since Fontaine doesn't seem to have a legislative branch within the 4, it would make sense that this would be a way for Lady Farina to listen and answer the calls of her people. After Act 5 of Fontaine's Archon quest, Lady Farina leaves her post and gives it to Iudex Neuvillette, effectively removing herself from Fontaine's government. Next we have is Iudex Neuvillette, who is the supreme judge of Fontaine's judicial system, as well as the Hydra Sovereign Dragon. Neuvillette's duties of mostly the following, being the judge over the trials of Fontaine, reviewing over evidence, as well as creating some of the laws of Fontaine. Neuvillette's duties are primarily court-related, so he doesn't really have any other tasks that require his attention, though after the final act of Fontaine's Archon quest, he does receive the duties of the Hydra Archon after Farina leaves, as well as maintaining control over the energy within Fontaine. Cause for those who may not know, the Oratrice, which is the judge machine, also has another function, which is creating a special power called Indemnitium, which does power the court of Fontaine, as well as the islands of Areneas, which is where the Opera Epiclese is located. But after the final Archon quest, it stops functioning, but also Neuvillette does gain his full dragonhood, after the divine power of Focalors ends her existence to save Fontaine, which in turn has allowed Neuvillette to use Fontaine's other source of power, Archie, which he can control as an alternate source to Indemnitium that the Oratrice provided. Now let's move on to the branches of Fontaine's government, starting with the Maison Cardinalice. The Maison Cardinalice is documented on the wiki as being the overseers of Fontaine's finances, as well as other administrative functions. Now since there isn't a lot of information about this branch, I will provide my own theory as to how and what they are. I believe that the Maison Cardinalice is a mix of the executive and legislative branch, which would be called a fusion of power. Now pre 4.2, the head of this branch would be Lady Farina as the Hydra Archon. Now, I feel that this does make sense, since during her flashbacks, she does mention about how the Maison Cardinalice announced her succession to the public. Now, I also believe that within this branch, there would be an advisor to the Archon, as well as governors who would rule over the smaller parts of Fontaine. A good example of a governor would be Navia, since her family does run the Spina di Rosula, which is an organization that runs within Poisson, and does help the people. Though she isn't an active member of the government, but her being a governor of the Maison Cardinalice would make the most sense. I do also believe that Neuvillette would be a co-head of this branch, since he did say that he has written some of the laws within Fontaine, and Lady Farina during this time does rely on him. Though of course, post 4.2, I believe he does become the full head of this branch, as at the end of the final Archon quest of Fontaine, he mentions that Farina relinquished her title as Archon and gave it to Neuvillette, which in turn makes him the third Hydra Archon, in a sense. And yes, I know that the Hydro throne is gone, but it's not like the people of Fontaine know that. Now next up on our branches, we have the Maison Gardiennage. Luckily, this branch is documented very well on the wiki. The Maison Gardiennage is in charge for the safety and order of Fontainian citizens. Their primary forces are made up of human guards and Gardamex, which are clockwork mechs that patrol the areas of Fontaine, and are controlled by the guards. Now the guards and the Gardamex are part of the standard security within Fontaine, but there are two additional branches that are built for more specialized tasks than the regular guards couldn't handle. That being the Marechaussee Phantom and the Special Security and Surveillance Patrol. First we will do the Special Security and Surveillance Patrol. Based on the wiki and how the game shows us, the Special Security and Surveillance Patrol are an elite squadron that handles the more difficult criminals. And they don't use standard gear. They are known for using muskets as well as skilled in unarmed combat, as per request of the current captain of the Special Forces, Captain Chevreuse. Though for bonus facts, some members are and could be descendants of criminals, as long as they are capable of upholding the law and enforcing justice. And for our other additional branch, we have the Marechaussee Phantom. The Marechaussee Phantom are comprised mostly of Melusines, as the Melusines have the ability to see things that humans can't, so they are more focused on investigating criminal activity. This makes them the most efficient part of the Maison Gardiennage. Now for our third branch, we have the Maison Gestion. Now the Maison Gestion is responsible for the paperwork, approvals, confidential items, and personal files within the Palais Mammonia. So based on this branch would be the bureaucracy of Fontaine's government. And based on some of the quests in the game and the wiki's info, it does not seem to be very organized. Apparently, even getting a paperclip takes multiple rounds of paperwork and approval, so it does sound like a very stressful place in Fontaine's system. But I would guess that Neuvillette, being the ever-perfectionist that he is, would probably have made sure to hire only the best. For this branch would also have the collections of every case that has ever happened in Fontaine's history, and most likely the records of every citizen, financial records, and so on and so forth. All I have to say, good luck to them for working there. Now for our final branch of government, and the one that all of us who have played Genshin Impact have experience with, the Maison Ordalies. The Maison Ordalie is the judicial branch of Fontaine's government, being led by Neuvillette post 4.2, because before that he only had half of the authority, as the other half was controlled by
Oratrice Mécanique d'Analyse Cardinale.
Exactly. A very iconic part of Fontaine's court system, because prior to 4.2, the Oratrice by law was the final verdict of the courts. Now of course, technically, according to Nihida, Fauchelevent had the final say of every trial, though of course she isn't wrong, as we find out that Fauchelevent is within the Oratrice, which makes what Nihida said true, from a certain point of view. Now of course, post 4.2, with both the full authority of the Hydro Dragon and the role of the Hydro Archon, Neuvillette is now the full judge and jury of the courts. Now truth be told, we don't know much of this system before Neuvillette came into office, though according to the wiki, between 500 and 400 years ago, the Oratrice seemed to do all the judgment on its own. My theory is that Lady Farina must have been sitting on the grand chair above the Oratrice. acting as if she was the one giving the verdict. This would of course make the most sense. For the type of government structure I believe Fontaine has, once again this is my own theory, and if you have any suggestions as to what you think it might be, please comment below. So I believe during the reign of Farina de Fontaine before Neuvillette, it was an autocracy, which is where the government has absolute power held by the ruler, which in this case is Lady Farina. You could say this is a theocracy, which does make most sense since in the eyes of Teyvat, she is the Hydra Archon, which of course in Teyvat is the equivalent of a god, though we don't fully know if she had any subordinates that ruled on her behalf. And then when Neuvillette was invited to the court of Fontaine, I believe the structure changed, as he did have some reforms that changed Fontaine's law, which would make sense on how he managed to bring Lady Farina to trial. Which I am a bit still confused on this concept and could go into a bit more of a rant, but I feel like I'd be on sidetrack. So the best I could think of at this point in the timeline would be that this would be a ceremonial monarchy, also known as a limited monarchy. Now I believe this makes the most sense, as when the traveller arrived in Fontaine, Farina tried to have them arrested, but forward by Linny due to a technicality. Now instead of overriding this law so that she could get what she wants, she walks away. By this presentation, this represents that after Neuvillette created the reforms, this has limited Farina's authority over arresting people. Now of course, after the fall of Fauchelevent and Farina leaving her post as the Archon, Neuvillette now has full authority over Fontaine, which in turn brings it back to an autocracy, though I am not sure if maybe he put some sort of reforms to restrict his powers, as this would help with checks and balances in any future situations. And that's it. This is my full analysis into Fontaine's government system. I will say I did find this a bit enjoyable, as I was already interested in the world building of Genshin Impact, and Fontaine is one of my more favourite nations. Now, if you did find this video pretty interesting, please provide a comment below as to what nation I should do next. And also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as well. This will help the channel reach to more people who enjoy this type of content. Anyway, peoples, my name is Mighty, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!